I'm all about mental health, my mental health. And in order to preserve my mental health, I have to carefully evaluate what I should discuss with family, friends, coworkers, and particularly on social media. First, I rarely discuss politics with anyone except my closest family. Now, I've always believed that no one wants to hear my thoughts on politics, and frankly, I feel the same about them. There's a few close friends over the years who pretty much hold the same values I do, and we may talk about current events from time to time, but never in a crowd and never out in the open. As far as coworkers, I think most of us realize that it's bad business to get into political discussions at work, and I think that those types of discussions rarely end well anyway. I've found that the less my coworkers know about me, particularly when it comes to like political ideas or my political opinions, the better we get along. Especially when you work in a diverse setting, such as a hospital like I do. There's many cultures, there's many different backgrounds, and you're bound to offend someone. And when your paycheck depends on that job, it's just best to keep your thoughts to yourself. Now, I'll admit that there have been a few coworkers over the years who, through secret hand signals or some other method, we just discovered that we agreed on a lot of things. So when no one is around, we may talk about what's in the news, but usually it's in a whisper. So speaking of whispers, does that remind you of some other countries? Anyway, social media. Not too much of an issue for me on social media. I really don't do any social media with the exception of Facebook. I joined Facebook like everyone else did, way back when. Mainly just to connect and reconnect with people from high school or such. And, I really found it pretty useful for that. And I still find Facebook good for a few things. Like there's a local historical group that discusses like the history of my town. They post a lot of old pictures and some information about certain things that are just kind of fun. But I've always stayed away from the crazies on Facebook that honestly believe that their posts are going to kind of change everybody's mind. And that's also amazing to me because a lot of those folks I know, and they're really highly educated people, and you'd think that they know better, but obviously they don't. So I've said this to people a lot, mainly in regard to Facebook. I'll tell them that I'm grateful for the opinionated folks who post their beliefs because, it kind of takes the guesswork out of wondering where they sit on issues. So I just kind of stalk Facebook, I kind of know who to avoid when it's necessary. So yes, I'm a Facebook stalker, taking mental notes of who thinks what so I can be more selective when it comes to who I can trust. Do you feel like I do that we're constantly subdividing ourselves into smaller and smaller groups? The number of subgroups that we're being lumped into, it must have a purpose, don't you think? I just don't know what that purpose is yet. Now, none of that is good for my mental health, so I try to avoid everything, all that I've said, but it's hard to do. I mean, I've lived long enough to have not just formed an opinion, but I have an opinion that's based on experience. Experience owning property, paying taxes, living through all the big and little things that life throws at each of us. So once in a while, I feel an obligation to speak up when I see things going sideways. But I really do speak up because in the end, I have to look out for me and I have to look out for my loved ones. It makes me think, though, that if we went back into the late 1930s Germany, how many people were like me, perhaps disagreeing with the politics, but at the same time understanding the reality that you have to earn a living and that you have to survive. And the only way to do that is to lay low, under the radar, don't make waves, and just hope not to be noticed. So every time I get a day or two off from work, I sit down and I think about what I want to make a YouTube video about. I start out thinking about whether I have an obligation as an experienced healthcare provider to call out some of the crap that I see and stuff that I hear being talked about, crap about masks, vaccines, etc. Believe me, I have very clear opinions on all of that stuff, but I've discovered in the first few weeks of the pandemic that if I valued my job and its associated paycheck, better stay quiet, keep your opinions to yourself. And I still feel that way because where I work anyway, unless you're, full-blown party line, you better stay quiet and just keep them guessing. I'll tell you a story, and it has to do with assumptions that some people have towards others. I was preparing to teach a physiology course to a large group of students, and it was the fall semester back in 2015. I remember the year because it was a presidential election year. It was late summer before the start of the semester. Because it was a pretty large group of students, I think it was around 100 students, I had two other professors teaching it with me. Now, they never asked me about my politics, these professors. They just assumed that because I was teaching a class and had a couple of doctorates that I must be like, I don't know, party line liberal or something. Therefore, they apparently felt no hesitation to discuss their views on the upcoming election. I elected to stay quiet because first, I had to teach with these ladies for the next few months, and second, I just didn't need the grief. I knew I was never going to change their minds, and I really don't care to change any minds anyway. I mean, if you think like me, it's probably because you've experienced similar things to me and have similar values to me. I'm not going to change any of that, but it's made me realize that if you live in an area that's predominantly one political persuasion, you'd better just lay low and get along. That has definitely preserved my mental health. So having said all of this, I'm human. I get upset inside when I see people who appear to have similar backgrounds to me, and yet they appear to think almost polar opposite to me. I often wonder just how can that be? Was there something they experienced that solidified their convictions, or was it things that I saw and did earlier in life that solidified mine? I mean, right out of high school, I was hired as an EMT and a firefighter and jumped into the first paramedic program in my area back in the early 1980s. I learned what life was really about during those years. And to this day, I learned a lot about how reality is, and it's not the utopia that so many people think it's possible. So that no doubt separates me from a lot of folks. Those experiences, they just aren't what other people carry with them. Nobody knows, unless you've done that type of work, what it's like to walk into somebody's home at 2 a.m. when they weren't expecting company. So I found myself making videos, responding to like news articles that are just so biased and so full of crap that I wonder just how can they get away with it? I mean, media loves to throw a little bit of truth along with a ton of politics and wokeness into anything healthcare related. I mean, yesterday, the World Health Organization is trying to say that climate change, deforestation, and globalization will be somehow responsible for the next pandemic. Well, if you're like me, I think the next pandemic is already in a test tube in a lab somewhere at some university or bioresearch lab, waiting to be accidentally or intentionally leaked. It's just my opinion, but let's be honest. Just exactly who can you go to for 100% accurate information today? Definitely not the reputable medical journals who have clearly sold out to the woke editors, the deans of the universities, and advertisers. Definitely not the major news media who have sold out to the pharmaceutical industry, who advertises constantly on every major media network. And for that matter, our own government. I mean, I'd really love to believe that they still had my best interest at heart, but there's money attached to every single thing the government does. I mean, just take a look at who funds the FDA. It's predominantly the pharmaceutical companies. So I try to not go off on the rails on conspiracies, but I don't know. This just came to mind too. Speaking of rails, I was thinking about this last night. I'll tell you a very quick story. There's a bridge near me. It's not a fancy bridge by any means. It's a railroad bridge, and it crosses over a 4-lane parkway. It was built a long time ago when trucks weren't as tall as they are today. And so at least a dozen times a year, a truck strikes this low-lying bridge and tears off the roof of the trailer or whatever, and usually spills whatever the truck was carrying all over the place. Unfortunately, even back in 2010, a double-decker bus slammed into this bridge, killing 4 people on the second deck of that bus and injuring a bunch of other people. Yet nothing got done about this bridge. I mean, they say they can't lower the roadway because it's right next to a lake, and they can't raise the bridge. So they've put up all sorts of flashing and blinking lights and signs, but obviously it never does any good. And I would think that, something simple like hanging a chain or something over the roadway, like what they put in parking garages so that tall vehicles don't get wedged into a parking garage, that would make sense. I mean, if a truck hits a chain or two, the driver's probably going to get curious and may actually stop before hitting the bridge. But then I got thinking, and, I'm probably way off on this, but I was thinking, what happens when a tractor trailer from a large trucking carrier, for example, hits that bridge? Now, I would think probably lots of lawsuits. Probably the owner of the railroad probably sues the guy that hit the bridge, or the trucking company. Probably the county or the city probably also sues. I mean, there's probably a lot of money that's going on here. So, is it the lucrative payouts from settlements that prevent real solution from taking hold? I don't know. I mean, I have no way of knowing, and I definitely can't find any information on it, but it wouldn't surprise me to someday find out that payouts from lawsuits probably being too good to make anyone really address the problem about the low bridge. So I don't know, it's just an aside thing, but I think what I'm trying to say is that money seems to be attached to just about everything. And if you're really wondering why something is occurring, just follow the money. So anyway, as much as I want to dive into and make videos that, complain about every wrong-headed move in healthcare, it's probably a losing battle anyway. Somebody is making money on our current situation with staff shortages persisting, nurses not wanting to work in the hospital, and bed closures becoming permanent. Oh, and that was something that I wanted to mention too. Yesterday, ABC News posted an article on staff shortages in healthcare. And one hospital association CEO said that nurses either quit during the pandemic or they found other jobs outside the hospital. And the only way that hospitals can get nurses to work in the hospital is to pay them more. So he was kind of like blaming the nurses for either leaving the hospital or just being downright greedy. So, there you go. Well, I guess, I've said enough about all of this for now. There's times where you just have to walk away from all the crap that's going on right now and either hope that it's going to get better or just prepare for what's coming next. I'd appreciate your thoughts on the comments section below. And if you found interest in what I've said, please like and subscribe to my channel. And until next time, I hope you have a great day. Bye.